This is going to be the full breakdown of the Xana coronal injuries. And we're going to start with stab and incised wounds of the head and neck. There was 23. The first one is a incised wound, linear incised wound. It's only 3/4 of an inch by 1/8, and it's got a 1/16 to 1/8 inch dark red marginal abrasion and a 1/8 inch superficial incised tail extending anteriorly from the anterior of the wound. And the wound travels downward to a depth of 3/8 of an inch. And this is going to be right on top of the head on the superior frontal parietal scalp, just right of the midline. So really right here. And it is just a incised wound, just a cut with a little bit of a tail right on top of the head. Number 2, this one's a little bit different. It mentions this is also on the right posterior parietal scalp. So posterior is towards the back of the head. So on the right parietal scalp towards the back, it's an incised wound back here. It talks about its wound edges, irregular wound edge laterally, which indicates a serrated blade. It has a rectangular abrasion extending at an angle from the lateral wound edge. So it does have some type of rectangular abrasion, which could be consistent with the guard of a knife. And fine striations can be seen within the abrasion. So fine striations is another way to indicate serrades on the blade. So again, this is another cut, and it's got a tail that extends out with fine striations, irregular wound edges. It's most certainly got serrades on the blade. That's 2. Now, the next one is going to be an incised wound, a cut on the right temporal scalp above the right ear. This one is 1 by 1/4 inch, and it's when it says gaping, that means it's opened up pretty well. And the wound track travels downward to approximately 3/4 of an inch. So a slash on the side of their head, just something that's happening during the fight. The fourth one is going to be a slash on the back of the head. This is the left posterior parietal scalp. Posterior parietal scalp to the left over here. 2 by 1/8 inch curved linear incised wound, which means it kind of grows at a little bit of a curve. It has irregular wound edges, indicating a serrated blade was used to make this cut. And it's a depth of 1/2 inch. So it's a cut on the back of the head, likely caused by a serrated edge blade. Now, at the vertex, these are 2 wounds. At the vertex, right at the center of the top of the head, just left of the midline, just left. It's a wound complex consisting of 2 intersecting linear incised wounds, ranging from 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch in length, up to an 1/8 inch in width, and it's a 1/2 inch deep. So these are 2 just cuts. They do intersect, but it is a wound complex, but these look incidental in my opinion. Something that happened in the midst of a bunch of other cuts on the head. Now you can see right next to that is a set of 3 linear incised wounds, 3/4 of an inch to 1 3/4 of an inch in length, up to 3/8 inch in width. And it also talks about the outer table of a skull, shows a cluster of linear and curved linear defects. This is actually talking about the outer edge of the skull, which is going to be the center of the forehead on another cut, which we've identified as the A. It's a 1/2 inch. So these are just 3 straight cuts right here, which is very, now that I look at this, good grief, it's associating these 3 linear incised wounds with the cluster of the linear and curved linear defects, which is right here on the forehead, the A. Set of 3, they don't intersect. Woo! 111 A. Good grief. Could be 3 lightning bolts. A could be 3 for the 3 shamrocks next to the A. This one actually might have some significance. Good grief. Okay, then the next one, because this one was mentioning the next one, and there are three right here next to the other mark. Good grief. On the central forehead is the wound complex. We've already gone over this in detail. It's consisting of 3 intersecting linear and curved linear incise wounds. They're a 1/2 inch in defects. I mean, this is no doubt an A carved right here, and good grief, right above it are 3 straight line 111, 3 lightning bolts with the A. Good grief. Okay, next on the left forehead is a 1/2 by 1/8 inch linear stab wound obtained from the 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Okay, so this is actually going to be a stab in the top of the head. I believe this was caused as Xana was bent over fighting her way to the bed with Ethan, but it's a 10 to 4 wound on the left forehead. I've got this wrong. I've got to fix it. Hang on. Correct orientation of it from 10 to 4. The 10 o'clock end is squared, the 4 o'clock end is sharp. And the fact that this wound actually goes in 3/4 of an inch and it's traveling from back to front, a depth of 3/4 of an inch, this is almost, in my opinion, definitive proof that this is not a K-bar creating this wound. And the reason I say that is a 3/4 inch deep, this is a stab wound. When it goes in 3/4 of an inch on a K-bar, this wound should have 2 sharp points, because you can see in a 7-inch K-bar over here that until the blade point gets to almost 2 inches, it is a clip point blade that are sharp on both sides. A 3/4 inch deep wound, this on a K-bar would be right here. I mean, you would have 2 sharp points, not a square edge on one. I mean, you'd have to get 2 inches for this edge to square on a K-bar. 3/4 inch deep wound, it cannot be a K-bar. I mean, that's definitive proof that this is not a clip point K-bar creating this wound at 3/4 of an inch with a squared end. Now, it also shows it's next to a wound that shows a triangular defect, 1/8 by 1/4 of an inch. So they're associating another wound possibly with this wound. I don't know why. But this is likely an attacker holding the knife downward in their left hand, making this wound, because it's wound travels from the descendant's front to back in approximately 3/4 of an inch. I believe that's a good indication of actually holding the knife. And actually, you can't really tell which way they're holding the knife in this one, because if she's bent over as she's receiving this wound, it could have been either orientation on the hand. So, but either way, it absolutely, in my opinion, excludes the K-bar, because of the clip point blade at 3/4 of an inch would show sharp on both ends. This one absolutely does not. Next, we've got on the glabella, medial to the left eyebrow. The glabella is a point in between the eyes here, and it says medial on the left eyebrow, so it's going to be roughly in this position. We've got another stab wound. This is a stab wound oriented from 12 to 6. As you can see, 12 to 6. And the 12 o'clock end is squared, 6 o'clock end is sharp. And they cannot determine the depth of this one because it went into the sinus cavity. So, but it's a 1/2 inch by 1/8 of an inch. And because of elasticity, we can't really get too much further into that, but it does show a 1/16 by 1/8 inch rectangular abrasion at superior aspect, which is up here, which would be interesting, because I believe that is indication of the guard of the knife, but there's not much more we can do on that one. Now, next we got the upper right cheek. It's 3/4 by 3/16 inch linear incise wound. This is a cut on the cheek, and it does not say anything about it being, anything indicating it's a serrated blade. It's just a cut. Now, on the lower right cheek is a 1 3/4 by 3/16 curved linear stab wound. This is actually a stab wound with undermining extending anteriorly. So it doesn't say anything indicating it was a serrated blade. It travels right to left, back to front, Depth cannot be accurately accessed due to the wound track entering the oral cavity. So this one is interesting, actually. It's curved linear and it's a stab wound. Like the blade is actually curved a little bit. I'll have to come back to this one. Next, we've got this one, which is the biggest telltale mark of any proving that the knife was serrated. You've got this wound on the chin down here. It's extending laterally from the right side of the chin. It's a gaping, approximately 3 1/4 inch curved linear incise wound, so it's a cut. But it says with discontinuous 1/16 to 1/8 inch marginal abrasions along the inferior edge. That is clear indication of a serrated blade. And then it says the lateral end is angled and showed scalloped wound edges. Just like you see on a scallop shell, this is how a pathologist defines this is a serrated blade making this cut. So, I mean, there's no way around it. That's a serrated edge knife. And then it talks about a set of parallel linear yellow abrasions that aren't cuts. Wound track travels from front to back, right to left, slightly downward to a depth of 1 inch. So this is a pretty big cut with absolute definitive proof of a serrated edge knife. Now, the next one is on the neck. This is a stab wound. This is one that I said would be fatal if given enough time. And the upper right neck, it's approximately 1 3/16 linear stab wound oriented from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. So you can see 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And I've got it backwards because in this one, the 10 o'clock end is sharp. The 4 o'clock end is squared. So it's a knife wound going in at this angle. It goes to a depth of 1 1/4 inches, which once again on the K-bar, 1 1/4 inches only goes down to right here. It should show double-sided points if it was a K-bar because of the clip point blade. It doesn't. It shows a square end and a sharp end, proving this wound was not made by a K-bar style knife or a clip point knife. Now, one of the things it does talk about, it has a yellow abrasion extending anteriorly, superiorly from the wound, a superficial 1 inch like a tail that goes superiorly and anteriorly, inside and to the up. Now, this wound involves skin, subcutaneous issue of the neck, and the right external jugular vein, and the superficial and deep musculature of the neck. So it does, you can see associated findings. There is moderate associated soft tissue. The external jugular vein is perforated. So this one did clip the jugular, which would have probably been a fatal wound, but it would have taken some time for this wound to be fatal. Next one is on the neck right here. On the lower right neck is a 9/16 by 3/16 linear stab wound. This is another stab wound oriented from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So you think 11 to 5 in this angle. Now this one's a little bit different. Both ends are sharp. Both ends are sharp, and it's a depth of 1 1/4 inches. This indicates a different knife actually made this wound. A different knife, because at 1 1/4 inches on a double-sided blade, like a clip point on a K-bar, then that's exactly what you would see. Totally different than what you see right here. 1 1/4 inches, you've got a square end and a sharp end. So that's two different knives making those two different wounds. This is a different knife as it describes the double sharp wound at 1 1/4. The last wound was square at 1 1/4. So that is interesting, and it would have proved fatal on its own because you can see it involves skin, superficial, deep musculature of the neck, the right internal jugular vein. The internal jugular vein is perforated from this wound as well. So it would have been a fatal wound. It just would have taken longer. Next, on the lower left cheek and upper left neck, there are 3 superficial linear incise wounds. So we got 3 slices on the neck here and the chin. Next, we have injuries to the 2 front teeth. The maxillary incisor, tooth number 8, which would be this one right here. It's been sharply divided. And then the other incisor, this one right here, the central incisor, tooth number 9, shows 2 incised defects. So this was damage done to the front teeth. And the way they say incised, I would say it's damage done to the front teeth by the tip of a knife. Now we get to the stab and incise wounds of the torso. On the medial upper left chest is approximately 3/4 inch by 3/16 linear stab wound oriented from 12 to 6. The 12 end is squared, the 6 end is sharp. This one's 6 inches deep. So we got the medial upper left chest right here, a 12 to 6 wound, one end square, the other end is sharp. And this one is a totally fatal wound. You can see that the anterior intercostal space, the anterior pericardial sac, the left atrium of the heart, the posterior pericardial sac, and the posterior fifth intercostal space. This one is, and then it talks about there are approximately 1,000 milliliters of blood within the left chest cavity. This is a fatal wound. It would have been fatal very fast, and the blood didn't extend out of her body. It ended up pooling in the chest cavity. But you can tell a lot by this wound. By the way, 3/4 inches, a lot slimmer than a 1.18 inch on a K-bar, but elasticity could come into play. The wound track is traveling from right to left, slightly downward. So right to left is going to be the right to left in the victim. So it's going to be going this way, which indicates it's probably going to be a left-handed strike, in my opinion. And it's going to be coming from above her down. I believe this is when Xana was laying on the ground, one of the final strikes. Then we have this one. Now this strike is a little bit different. This is not a fatal strike, and I don't believe this is done with the same knife. And here's why. And it says 2 to 3 entrance. On the medial upper right chest is an approximately 1/2 by 1/4 inch gaping stab wound oriented from 9 to 3. So you can see 9 to 3. The 3 o'clock end is sharp over here. The 9 o'clock end is squared. And then it's got a 1/16 purple marginal contusion, which is the second wound here. And the superior wound edge is somewhat irregular, indicating this edge up here, the top edge, indicates it's got serrades on the blade. And then it talks about minimally hemorrhagic wound track involves the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and musculature of the chest. So this didn't hit any vital organs, so it's not going to be a fatal blow. It also has a square 1/16 yellow abrasion at the 9 o'clock end, which indicates the guard of the knife. And it's only a 4-inch deep wound. So this is likely a 4-inch knife hitting the guard, going in all the way, but it's not a fatal wound because it didn't hit any internal organs. This one totally different. This one has a depth of 7 inches. This is likely a large knife because the wound is 2 1/4 by 1.5 inch. It says it's curved linear and both ends are rounded. I believe this is a knife going in and twisting, which creates the rounded ends. And definitely a fatal wound, would have been fatal immediately. The right pulmonary artery and vein are perforated in this. And fifth intercostal space, middle lobe of the right lung, right helium. I mean, this hit lung. It destroys everything in the chest, 7 inches deep. This would have been a fatal wound like immediately. 7 inches. Then we've got 5 to 7. This is indicating 3 wounds here. On the lower left chest is a gaping, approximately 2 by 1 inch stab wound oriented from 12 to 6. So in this orientation, it's got a tail extending from the 6 o'clock end of the wound coming out. Both ends are rounded, indicating this one also twisted. 3 distinct linear defects apparent on the underlying rib cage, which means that they have looked at the bones and it correlates with this wound. There's 100 milliliters of blood and a blood clot within the pericardial sac, and 1,000 milliliters of blood left within the chest cavity. So the blood pooled in there. It had hit the heart. This is a absolute, instant death blow. 8 to 9. On the medial right abdomen is a 1/4 by 3/4 inch gaping stab wound from 12 to 6. This is the right abdomen. This is the front. Actually, that's showing the left abdomen there. It actually should be over here at the right abdomen. Okay, now this is an important one right here. This is a wound track, travels from front to back to a depth of 3 inches. And it's noting 2 wounds on the medial right abdomen. So on the right abdomen is an approximately 1 1/4 by 3 inch gaping stab wound oriented from 12 to 6. So 12 to 6, 12 o'clock end is squared. The 6 o'clock end is rounded. So again, this indicates a knife twisting in here. This end is squared. The front end, the blade twists and creates a rounded look. The wound edges show a tan marginal abrasion. At least 2 distinct linear defects are apparent in the underlining rib cage. So it may have even been 2 different stab wounds if they have 2 defects on the rib cage inside. This is a very important wound, though, because the hemorrhagic wound tract converges involving the skin, subcutaneous tissue, musculature, and the 7th intercostal space and the costal cartilage at the 8th rib. A stab wound in the 7th intercostal space, especially on the right side, is very likely to pierce the liver. This is the wound that most likely pierced the liver, which is what created the very dark colored blood by the nightstand where Xana was attacked. So very important wound right here, I believe. And it goes into 3 inches. So 3 inches, you can't determine anything on the knife, because once you go in 3 inches, even like a K-bar is going to have a squared. Next, we have this wound right here on the lateral right abdomen. This is in the stomach. It's a 1 1/4 by 9/16 gaping stab wound oriented from 9 to 3. So you got 9 to 3 in this orientation. Both ends are rounded, which indicates that this was a stab that twisted, creating the rounded ends on both sides. It's got a tan abrasion. The wound edges are irregular, indicating a serrated blade. It's only 3 inches deep. It's going from right to left and front to back, approximately 3 inches. It has 2 distinct wound tracks apparent in the underlying issue. It doesn't involve anything. It does, it does say that it may have clipped the colon. The serosa of the ascending colon shows linear defects, so this one definitely clipped the colon. So this is another stab wound into a soft area, only going in 3 inches. So once again, I believe this is going to be indicative of that smaller knife. Then you get to the back. On the back, it shows 2 wounds on the upper right back. So this is, if you're facing forward, this is showing the upper right back. These are incise wounds, which are cuts. The medial wound is horizontally oriented. It's 2 by 3/4 of an inch, 3 inches when reapproximated, and shows a 2.5 inch curved linear incised tail. And it doesn't say anything about anything indicating a serrated blade. The lateral wound is vertical, so it's got a lateral wound as well, and it measures 2.5 by 1 inch, 3 inches when reapproximated. So it's just 2 3-inch cuts on the back that go to a depth of 1.5 inches. And this one is the posterior left shoulder. I've already gone over this in another video, but it's 1/8 diameter, circular. And it's got a rectangular red-brown abrasion that's 1/2 by 1 1/8 inch. And that little circle's right in the middle of it. I believe this indicates a skull crusher on the bottom of a knife that created that wound. And then I've got the reasons for the skull crusher. I've already covered this. Then we get to the incised wounds of the right upper extremities. You've got 15 on the right arm in total, but when you break it down, it sounds like a whole lot, but here's what they actually entail. First, we've got an incised wound on the upper shoulder. The wound edges show discontinuous 1/16 tan abrasions, which is absolutely indicative of serrated blades. It goes front to back to a depth of 1.5 inches. So this is a slash with a tail. It does have a tail from the medial end of the wound, incised tail. Then a little bit further down the right arm, just above the right elbow, is another linear incised wound, again with irregular edges indicating a serrated blade. And this one is 1 by 1/8 of an inch, 1/2 an inch deep. And again, this is, I believe, going to be indicative of defensive wounds. The inferior aspect of the right elbow has got a curved linear incised wound, again with irregular edges. So again, indicating a serrated blade, 3/4 of an inch thick, deep, 3/4 of an inch deep. So again, on the arms, you can pretty much guarantee these are going to be defensive wounds by Xana. And then on the ventral right forearm, on the outside of the arm, we've got a incised wound, 3/8 of an inch deep, 2 3/4 inches long, another defensive wound, I believe. And then on the dorsal right forearm is a 1 1/4 by 1/2 inch incised wound, 1/2 inch deep. So again, another indication of a defensive wound. Then on the lateral right wrist, 1 3/4 up to 1/4 inch. It's a slice on the wrist, 8 inch deep. Another defensive wound. You can see on her right arm, she's holding it up and she's blocking a lot of these strikes. Then on the right hand, 2 gaping curvilinear incised wounds with irregular edges indicating serrated blade across her right hand. So again, these are 1.5 inches deep. These are defensive wounds. She's blocking the strikes with her right hand. Coming from a left-handed attacker, I think that would indicate. And then the reason there's so many wounds on Xana's right arm is because you've got 6 wounds here, linear and curvilinear incised wounds, but they're present on, you can see the tip of the thumb, 2 on the dorsal finger, and 2 on the third finger, and 1 at the dorsal fourth finger. So it's a slash, probably happened at the same time on this first one, that clips the thumb, the index finger, the middle finger, and the ring finger here. And then a second slash she's blocking clips the index finger and the middle finger here. Then on the right palm, we've got a serpentine incised wound with irregular edges indicating serrated blade. Serpentine means it goes like a snake. So it's again, she's blocking strikes from this knife. And then you go to the left arm. So she blocked almost everything with her right arm. I bet that Xana's right-handed. Incised wound of the left upper extremity. You've got in the left antecubical fossa, which is going to be the center of the elbow and the soft part of your arm there as your forearm meets your upper arm and the elbow. 2 by 1 inch linear incised wound with a superficial incised tail. So again, this is going to be a slash inside of the elbow, an inch deep. Probably happened as a defensive wound, I imagine. More defensive wounds on the ventrolateral left forearm, 3/4 inch by 3/16 inch incised wound, 1/2 inch deep right here, holding her left arm up to block, I believe. Here is a curved linear incised wound on the left forearm, and it's got a tail. And it says contused and abraded, which means indicative of serrated blade. And again, it looks like another wound as she's holding her left hand up to try to block the knife. And then there's 2 more slashes in the same general area, 2.5 inch and a 1.5 inch wound complex. These intersect. And again, these look like more defensive wounds. Then on her left hand, you've got 2 slashes with tails, with striations indicating a serrated blade, highly indicative of a serrated blade on those. Then there's this wound that we've all heard about that got the soft part in between the thumb and the index finger that cut down the arm. At the base of the thumb, extending into the web space, is a gaping 1 3/4 inch inside wound, again with irregular edges indicating a serrated blade, another defensive wound. And then On the left palm, there's another defensive wound. And this one was deep, cut the bones and all the muscles on the palm. And irregular edges indicate a serrated blade. And then on the mid left palm, we've got another one, another defensive wound, incise wound. Then we get to the lower extremities, and all we have are these two on the right shin that are 2 inches by up to an 1/8 inch linear incise wound. It doesn't say anything about anything with a serrated blade, though. It's just 2 right on the shin. One has a tail, superficial incised tail. And then on the back of the right leg, on the postlateral right calf, is a 2 inch by 1/4 inch curved linear incise wound. It doesn't indicate anything about serrated blade. It's just another slash. I believe these would have happened when Xana was on the ground. And that's it. But one thing I will point out, that even in the autopsy notes by the pathologist, they admit that when you get into the weapon characteristics, the findings are consistent with a blade 1 3/16 to 1 1/4 inch in width and approximately 5/32 to 3/16 in thickness, with a double-edged segment and a single-edged segment. Some wounds show findings consistent with a partly serrated blade. So this is what's so important. What the pathologists even themselves indicate is if it was one knife, then one side is going to be sharp, the other side is going to have a segment that's not sharp, and it's going to have a segment where both sides are sharp, and it's going to be partly serrated, not on the back, on the front where the blade is, which indicates there, if it was a K-bar that was creating all these wounds, which I've already showed whether that's impossible. Some of these were created by a 4-inch knife. But even if you tried to make the argument that it was a K-bar, there's a specific kind of K-bar that comes with serrated edges on the bottom of the knife right here. And most of them come with a straight blade. I think this is the reason why, if Brian Koberger or somebody in his family even ordered this knife, they don't want to show it to us, because I bet you it's this model that doesn't have the serrades versus this model with the serrades, which would totally contradict the findings of their own pathologist. Let me know your thoughts.